All right, so this is still section 2.3. And this time we're going to write equations of lines. Now here's the idea. You remember when we graphed, and I'm going to go ahead and show you. So remember we had graphed this line right here. See this right here? Okay, so here's what you got to do now. Now what you have to do is, given certain conditions, you have to say that this line is this equation. So somehow you've got to come up from information about this line to the equation. Before, you were given the equation and you're asked to do what? Graph it. Now you're going to be asked, you're going to be given certain conditions and then you're asked to find this. It's a little bit more challenging to go the other way. Going from the equation to a graph is a lot easier than going from information about the graph to the equation. It's a little bit more work you've got to do. Okay? Now, to be able to do that, though, there are two forms that you have to know about the equation of a line. The first one's this. The first one's called point-slope form. Point-slope form. And basically, the point-slope form, you remember your slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1? Remember that? Okay, so basically point slope form comes from this, except instead of using y2 and x2, we're just going to say y minus y1 over x minus x1. So we're just going to say that instead. And then remember in a previous course, when you have a fraction equal a fraction, this is a proportion. And you can solve a proportion by cross multiplying. Now look at this, cross multiply, and when I cross multiply, I get 1 times y minus y1 is what? Y. When you solve a proportion, you cross multiply, right? When I cross multiply, what's 1 times this numerator? Y minus y1 equals the slope times the denominator. And this right here is your formula for point slope form. So y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. That's the formula for point slope form. So point slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. But that's how it's derived. It's derived from the slope formula. It's derived from the slope formula. But when writing the equation of a line, you gotta have an x and a y. So what we do is replace y2 and x2 with just x and y. We leave y1 and x1 alone. That's gonna be our point. Now we say this: in order to use this formula right here, in order to use this, you must know a point and the slope. Hence, it's called point slope. So in order to use point slope, you got to know a what? Point and a slope. Hence the words point slope. Now your point is going to be x1 comma y1, not xy. You're going to whatever that point is, you're going to substitute into the x1 and the y1. You never substitute an xy. xy is your variable. x1, y1 are the coordinates of the point that's on that line. And the slope is denoted by what letter? Okay? And then the other form that you're going to use quite often is slope-intercept form. And what's slope-intercept form? Mx plus b. Okay? All right. So, here are the directions. Directions will say this. Now, I'll give you these two formulas. You just got to be able to use them. So remember, point slope form. What's the formula for point slope form? Y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. And what's the formula for slope-intercept form? Okay. All right, so here are the directions. Directions will say use the given conditions. Use the given conditions to write an equation in now on the worksheet, I think I just said write in slope-intercept form. Okay, on the worksheet. So I'm just going to say use the given conditions to write an equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, now here's the process you're going to go through. So here's the first one. Let's say the first one's this. Let's say that the slope is -3 and passes through the point 2, -1. So the slope is -3 and passes through the point 2, -1. Okay? All right. In order to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form, first of all, in order to use slope-intercept form, you've got to know the slope, and what else must you know? The y-intercept. Is this point a y-intercept? No. All right. So I can't go directly to the slope-intercept form. So here's the process you're going to go through. You're going to first of all write it in point slope form. So first, use point slope form. Okay, first use point slope form. Now what is point slope form? It is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. And in order to use it, what two things must you know? What two things must you know in order to use slope-intercept form? I'm sorry, point slope form? The slope and a point. And number one, do I know the slope and a point on that line? Yes. So keep in mind though that this is your x1, this is your y1. So when you substitute that point back into the formula, you've got to use it for x1 and y1. Do not ever put it for x and y. It's got to be replaced with x1, y1. So now all you do is just substitute. Okay, so you're going to say y minus y1, what's y1? -1, right? Equal the slope, which is what? -3 times x minus 2. All right, now we're at this point. Now you have to do this. You have to replace y subtract -1 as y plus 1. You've got to rewrite y subtract -1 as y plus 1 equals the slope times x minus 2. Now this right here is point slope form. Okay, that's point slope form. So the first thing you got to do is write it in point slope form. Students that do not replace y subtract -1 as y plus 1, for the most part, they do mess up. Some don't, but many do. So you got to remember, y subtract -1 means y plus 1. You need to write it as y plus 1. Don't leave it as y subtract -1. You must write it as y plus 1. Okay, now, so remember, you're always going to rewrite it as what form first? Point slope. Now, the question is, the directions said though to write in what form? Now I got to get what letter by itself here? Y. So there are a few more steps and you're done. So I'm going to distribute now. So y plus 1 equals what? One more step and you're done. What's the next step? Subtract 1. And so what's your y slope-intercept form? Plus 5, right? So that's slope-intercept form. You got to say y equals though. All right, in the blank you got to say y equals negative 3x plus 5. Okay. All right, let's look at number 2. All right, number 2, suppose you had this. Suppose the slope is 2/3 and it passes through the point negative 4, negative 2. So the slope is 2/3 and it passes through the point negative 4, negative 2. Okay. So again, you want to write the answer in slope-intercept form. There's no way you can use slope-intercept form right away because that point is not the y-intercept. So we're going to go directly to putting it into what form first? Point-slope form. So use point-slope form first. Remember, slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. And remember, negative 4 is your x1, and negative 2 is your y1. Okay, so then you're going to say y subtract a negative 2 equals 2/3 times x subtract a negative 4. You all agree? All right. Now, don't get y by itself. I need you to tell me what the point-slope form is. So you need to rewrite that y subtract negative 2 is what? Y plus 2. And you need to rewrite the x subtract negative 4 as what? X plus 4. Now this is point-slope form. So that's what we want in point-slope form. So whenever you have that y subtract a negative 2, then rewrite it as y plus 2. Okay, now to get in the slope-intercept form, I just got to get what letter by itself? Y. Okay, now the previous one, the slope was an integer, right? So that was an easy thing to deal with. All agree? When you distribute, that was easy, correct? Here, the slope is not an integer, but it's a fraction. So we still distribute, okay? So we're going to say y plus 2 equal negative 2/3 x. All right, now let's kind of talk about what this is. So you're going to say negative 2/3 times a what? Times a 4, and 4 is really 4 over 1, correct? Now remember when you multiply fractions, you reduce first and then multiply, but there's nothing to reduce. So then just multiply. What's the negative 2 times 4? What's negative 2 times 4? Negative 8. What's 3 times 1? 3. And so that goes here. So when I distribute the negative 2/3, I get negative 2/3 x minus 8 over 3. Why is it negative 2/3? Oh, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Y'all saw I made a mistake there, right? No, it's me. So, yeah. I'm sorry. So that should be a positive 8/3, right? Y'all agree? Yeah, so always double check. I'm not sure. Sometimes I'll think I see a negative when it's not even there. Okay. Now, one more step and you're done. What's the next step? Subtract 2. Now, use your calculator for the rest of this. Because remember, some of you, and be honest, some of you are not very good at adding fractions or subtracting fractions. So use your calculator. So here's the thing you would do on your calculator. So you have 8/3 subtract 2. So you're going to say 8 divided by 3. So how it looks? 8 divided by 3. Then I'm going to subtract what? 2, and then press equal, and you get this. Now, some of you may remember what 0.6666 is as a fraction. What's 0.6666 as a fraction? 2/3. Now, if you don't remember what that is, then remember we talked about this in class. You're going to press second, and then PRB to get to that fraction to decimal. Press enter, And you see you get 2/3? Okay? So this right here is 2/3. So my answer would be 2/3 x plus what? 2/3. So there's your equation of your line. So that's the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Okay? So make sure you use your calculator for this part so you don't mess up. All right? Let's look at number 3. Suppose, the slope is 4/5 and it passes through the origin. The slope is 4/5 and it passes through the origin. In the previous two, you were given the slope and a point, correct? All right. Now, here you're given the origin. What point represents the origin? 0, 0. 0, 0. Now, you may not notice this, but what is a y-intercept? 0. Because remember, the origin, we say it passes through the origin, right? So if it passes through the origin, doesn't it pass the y-axis at 0? So remember, your y-intercept is whenever x is 0, correct? The y-intercept is when x is 0. Well, isn't x 0 here? So that means that this is your what? That I've circled. The y-intercept. So your y-intercept is what? 0. So right away, I can go directly to slope-intercept form. Y equals ilm x plus b. What's ilm? 4/5 x plus b, and what's b? 0, and then that just becomes what? 4/5 x. So that would be your answer in slope-intercept form. But many students don't see it that way. So if you didn't see it that way, then you can go directly to what form first if you want to? Point slope form. So let's do point slope form. You'll see you get the same answer. So use point slope form. So y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So remember, this is your x1, this is your y1 of your point. So y minus y1, what's y1? Equals the slope, which is 4/5, times x minus x1, which is 0. But what's y minus 0? Y. And what's x minus 0? What's x minus 0? X. You just get 4/5 x. So that's 0, and that's just y. Okay? Number 4. Suppose the slope is negative 2/5, and it has x-intercept of 3. So the slope is negative 2/5 and has x-intercept of 3. Now it's not the y-intercept; it's the x-intercept. So don't say this is y equals negative 2/5 x plus 3. That's not true, because that's not your y-intercept. That's your x-intercept. So if I'm going to use point-slope form, then I need to change that x-intercept as a point, an x and a y coordinate. So you got to know what this is as an x-y coordinate. What's x? 3, and y is what? 0. So x-intercept of 3 means that as a point, my x-coordinate is 3, and my y-coordinate is 0. So now I can use point-slope form. Here's your x1, here's your y1. So use point-slope form. So y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So y minus y1, what's y1? 0 equals the slope, which is negative 2/5 times x minus 3. And then, but what's y minus 0? Y. And look, all I got to do, since that was y minus 0 is just y, all I got to do is distribute, and that's your answer. Just distribute, that's your answer. So negative 2/5 times x is negative 2/5 x. Now I've got to figure out this part, though. What's negative 2/5 times a negative 3 over 1? That's positive 6/5, so plus 6/5. There's your answer. That's slope-intercept form. So that's the equation of that line in slope-intercept form. Okay? Number 5. It's really not that difficult. It's just a matter of you practicing with this. And notice each time I'm using point-slope form each time. And once I get in point-slope form, I solve for y. All right, number 5. Suppose you had negative 2, 4, and 3, negative 1. So we'll say pass us through these points. How is that different from the other 4? How is this different from the other 4? You don't know the slope. In the other 4, you were given the slope. Here, you're not. And in order to use that point-slope form, what must you know in order to use point-slope form? A point, and I know a point. In fact, how many points do I know of? 2. But what's the thing I don't know? The slope. So what is it you got to find first, do you think? The slope. And how do you find the slope? What do you do? How do you find the slope of 2 points you're given? The slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you must find the slope first. Remember, the slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you must find that first. So let's call this x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. Okay, so let's find the slope. What's the slope? The slope is going to be y2. What's y2? Minus, so negative 1 minus y1, which is 4. Now, since I started with x2, I got to start with, since I started with y2, I got to start with x2. What's x2? 3. Subtract a negative 2. What's the numerator? What's the denominator? So what's the slope? Negative 1. So that's the slope. Okay? So your slope's negative 1. Okay, now I can go directly and use the point-slope form. Okay, y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So in order to use point-slope form, I must know the slope. Do I now know the slope? Yes, so notice that at number 5, you had to first of all find the slope. Then I got to know a point. In the previous problems, you were given a point. Now you're given how many points? 2. Does it matter, do you think, which one I use? No, because they lie in the same line. So we'll do both of them just to show you that it does not matter. So some students may use the first point, some students may use the second point. It does not matter. You'll get the same answer when you write in slope-intercept form. So let's use the first one first. So let's use the first point. Let's use the point negative 2, 4. So we get y minus, what's my y coordinate here? No, I'm using this point. What's the y coordinate here? 4 equals the slope, which we found to be what? Negative 1 times x minus, what's the x coordinate? Negative 2. Rewrite, whenever it's y minus or x minus a negative number, rewrite it. So this becomes y minus 4 equals a negative 1 times x what? Plus 2. Now what's the next step? Remember, this is point slope form now. What was that? Distribute? Right. Distribute. So I get y minus 4 equals negative x minus 2. And then finally, you do what? Okay? And so what's your answer? Plus 2. Okay? So that's the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. That's slope-intercept form. Now remember, someone else could have used what point? Yeah, so let's see if we get the same thing. So 3, negative 1. So we should get the same thing. Let's just check it though. Again, it does not matter which one you use. So y subtract the y coordinate. What's the y coordinate? Okay, negative 1 equals the slope, which is negative 1 times x subtract 3. Y subtract negative 1 means y plus 1. Rewrite it. Distribute the negative 1. This is negative x and then what? Plus 3. Finally, do what to both sides? Subtract 1, and so what's y? So you see, you get the same answer no matter which one you use. So it does not matter which point you use. Okay? All right. What about this one? This is number 6. Let's suppose the 2 points are 2, negative 3, and so 2, negative 3, and 5, 2. That's a 2. So 2, negative 3, and 5, 2. Okay, so if I'm going to find the equation of the line, I must always know what about that line? The slope. So I got to find the slope. So I don't know the slope, but I am given 2 points. I'm going to use the slope formula. So the slope will be, let's call this x1, y1, x2, y2. So you'll have 2 subtract a negative 3. Now since I started with y2, I got to start with x2. So what's x2? 5, and then we'll subtract 2. What's the numerator? What's the denominator? So there's your slope. The slope is 5/3. Okay, now I'm going to use point slope form. So now I'll use point slope form. Let's just go ahead and use that second point. So let's use the point. It doesn't matter, right? I'm going to use the second point. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one you use. I was going to use the second point so I can get that fraction, so we could use a calculator. But using the first one, we'll do the same thing. So I'm going to get y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So it's going to be y minus y1. What's y1? 2 equals the slope. What's the slope? 5/3 times in parentheses x minus what? 5. That's where I'm at. So that's your point slope form. Okay. All right. Now Now we got distribute, so we're gonna rewrite this in slope-intercept form. So distributing, I get y minus 2 equals 5/3 x. Now be careful with this part, a fraction times negative 5. So that's 5/3 times a negative 5 over 1, right? I can't reduce, I'm going to multiply the numerators. What's 5 times a negative 5? And then that's going to be in the denominator is a 3. That's minus 25/3. Okay? And then what's the last step I do? Add 2 to both sides. Combine like terms, I get y equals 5/3 x. Now use your calculator with this. Use your calculator. So you have access to a calculator, use it. So you're going to say negative 25/3 though. Don't say 25/3. It's a negative. And make sure you know where your negative button is in your calculator. So negative 25 divided by 3. So negative 25/3. Then I'm going to add 2, right? And when I do that, I'm going to get this right here. Now, this decimal part is easy. Again, that's 0.333, which some of you already know is what fraction? 0.333 repeating. 1/3. But if you did not know that, if you don't know that this is negative 6 1/3, then use your calculator. You're going to say second PRD, so I can get that fraction to decimal. Press equal, and you see it gets negative 6 1/3. So negative 6 1/3 is what this is. But you have to rewrite this as an improper fraction. So as an improper fraction, we're going to say 6 times 3 is 18. 18 plus 1 is 19, so you get negative 19 thirds. Right, and so that's your answer in slope-intercept form. Okay, so that's the equation of that line in slope-intercept form. Okay? All right, now, going back, I got to find this page. We should have enough room in that page. Going back to, okay, so let's go back to this. I'm going to go back to this page here because I forgot to do something with this part here. So remember this part in page 8 when we talked about the slope of x equals 3 is undefined and you want to graph this. Okay, so let's suppose you want to graph this. 2x plus 6 equals 0. So 2x plus 6 equals 0. So you're going to see one like this on my math flag. 2x plus 6 equals 0. Don't let that throw you off. What do you think you would need to get by itself in order to graph it? See, don't let that throw you off. What are you going to do? How are you going to graph this? Okay, what now? What did you say? Get x by itself. So over here, wasn't x by itself over here at the top? Yeah. So get x by itself. Don't let that equation throw you off. So get x by itself, so you can subtract 6 from both sides. So that's 0 here, so you get 2x equals negative 6, and then finally divide by what? By 2. And so what is x equal to? Negative 3. And so now you just know the fact that x equals negative 3 means that as a t-table, well, first of all, I really need for you to know right away what kind of line this is. Is vertical or horizontal? Vertical, good. If you did not know that, then just say x always equals what? Negative 3, no matter what y is. And so use you plot those points. Negative 3, 0 is here. Negative 3, 2 is here. And there's your graph. All right? Okay, so that's how you would graph something like this. Get the variable by itself, and it's in this case, it's a horizontal line. I'm sorry, it's a vertical line. Okay? All right, now, that takes care of section 2.3. I think that was all the worksheets for 2.3. So you should be good with 2.3. So if you look at 2.3 part 3, you're given the slope and you're given a point, so you know how to do that. And here you're given 2 points, so you know how to do that as well. Okay, now remember the direction says get in slope-intercept form. Okay? All right, so we have a couple more things. So rather than just taking a break, I think we can end this in about 20 minutes. So we'll leave before 8:30. So let's just, if you got to go to the restroom real quick, then just go to the restroom real quick. But now we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular, and that will be the 2.4.1. Take that worksheet out.